Welcome back to the discussion Risk Management, the Core of Continuous Monitoring, sponsored by Three Wire Systems on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guest today is Ryan Latreille, Chief Technology Officer at Three Wire Systems, and I'm your moderator, John Gilroy. Now, we talked about continuous monitoring earlier, and I keep thinking of software development, and there's a term in agile software development called technical debt. And I think you have kind of an interesting take on this concept of debt when it comes to risk management, don't you?
I like to think I do. So, technical debt in the sense of agile development is, hey, I come across a problem, I decide to pass that problem to my future self in hopes of getting it done quicker. So I've accumulated this debt that eventually I have to go back and patch that hole. I have to go back and fix that thing. So when we talk about risk debt, when we start doing things in cybersecurity, we often make those trade-offs all the time, especially in troubleshooting. Security Operations Center are known for this. The mission is calling for, I need this today. I have to have this right now. I cannot wait. So therefore, in the name of the mission or the specific business function, I make a decision to do an any, open, or I do this or I do that. I forget to go back and patch those holes. And that just propagates daily on scales that are exponential. And then how do I ever find the time to go back and fix those? I don't. What I do is I get a point product that says it can fix it. It goes in and fixes one small problem by introducing 10 more.
When you talk to software developers, they know what has to be accomplished in the final product, and they have a trade-off with what they call technical debt. And so you realize you must have 10 things in order to manage the risk, but you're under time constraint. So what you do is you include that in a later iteration to bake it in rather than bolt it on. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. But John, if you've taken the time to do a very thorough and extraordinary continuous monitoring policy, you catch all those in real time. If you've done a great job of employing your investments and your new investments for point products to do a solid comply to connect policy, all that risk debt is mitigated. It just decreases exponentially because now your automated tools are fixing those things for you, so you don't have to remember to go back and fix them.
We talked about technical debt and different concepts here. There's a company in town called MITRE, and they have this framework called ATT&CK. How does that fit into this discussion?
ATT&CK is a great framework. That is essentially the tactics, techniques, and procedures that adversaries will use to exploit vulnerabilities inside networks. There's a lot of other frameworks out there too that do that. But if you have a strong continuous monitoring policy, and it boils down to this, so you know what you have. The issue with ATT&CK framework is not the ATT&CK framework itself. The issue is, how do I take what the ATT&CK framework is telling me inside my enterprise and do something with it? How do I make that information executable inside my space? If I don't know what I have, and the ATT&CK framework says that application X is vulnerable by Y, and I don't know how many application X's or Y's I have inside my environment in any reasonable amount of time, how can I possibly guard against it, right? So the ATT&CK framework, very, very awesome. The ability to use it, that's where a lot of organizations are falling short.
And that brings back to the discussion of a point solution that may just address one small part of it, but not see the entire picture.
Absolutely. And even if you have a point product that you absolutely like that's looking at one specific feature set inside your network, it's always a good idea to have more than one thing looking at anything, right? And all the computer science guys out there listening to this, that's the whole Byzantine Empire problem. You definitely want to make sure you get a consensus on what you're looking at.
And just because you solve the problem today doesn't mean that tomorrow someone else come knock on your door with a new exploit, and you have to go back to the start of the framework and back to continuous monitoring and how to remediate the problem and maybe bring up the ATT&CK framework again. Is that right? Absolutely.
You hit on another point. Our adversaries are constantly changing. I think, remember in the first segment we talked about the only constant thing is change. And the attackers are doing the same thing. So the MITRE framework, or any framework that's publicly available in the open source, they're looking at that and saying, oh, well, they're on to me. So now I've got to change this tactic just slightly. And that's what we call 0 days and advanced persistent threats and all that type of thing.
When you look at remediation, is it possible that you have a new attack and you deploy a change, but that change can have unintended consequences on other systems that may make them more vulnerable? So this has to be orchestrated somehow, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it happens all the time. That cascading effect, you can introduce the latest and greatest point product that'll collate or collect all the information about a certain thing with administrative or escalated privileges, and all of a sudden you've just introduced an entire new threat vector inside your space completely unintentionally.
Let's loop back and talk about Dell. So you must work carefully with Dell, and Dell has a lot of hardware, a lot of software, a lot of products that will allow you to apply your solution. Is that how Dell fits in?
Absolutely. They also bring in the credibility, right? A company like Dell Technologies, with the innovation history that they have, the investments that they make all over the industry, allows us to not start reinventing the wheel every single time we go into these customers. You know, we go in starting off with what they already have invested, understanding what they already have invested, and working very, very closely with all the Dell technologists and Dell EMC teams to truly understand how to springboard where they are today, instead of going back to ground zero and saying, well, you know, let's take a look at what you have and let's tabletop that. That's not what we have to do. That's what they offer us. It's a tremendous capability for both us and the customer to extremely take the value proposition and propel it forward.
You mentioned there are computer science majors out there, and I hope they're watching and listening carefully. Would they look at this attack framework and view it as an iteration, and it should be redone every 6 or 8 months?
I think they would argue that it's going to be redone at the millisecond level, John, to be honest with you. I mean, the tactics are changing all the time, and once you know a tactic, now it becomes a heuristic search problem, right? So you're just looking for it as it happens. And oftentimes, a lot of the theorists in this industry say that if you're playing defense, you're already losing. I don't necessarily subscribe to that entire train of thought, but I definitely think that it's worth a conversation. There's a lot of conversations going on right now in the world in OCO and DCO and how they relate and how they don't relate. And it's very important to dig into that and really have a future discussion about it.
Is this concept of C2C and continuous monitoring, is this being discussed at larger conferences like RSA?
Every conference I've been to, and you look at the blogs, they're always talking about this problem. This is a constantly changing problem. How do I do this? How do I ensure that my network is being secured, and how am I automating it to alleviate and repurpose some of my human assets to do more human-centric things versus just discerning white noise?
I'd like to thank today's guest, Ryan Littré, Chief Technology Officer, 3Wire Systems. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy, and you're listening to Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search 3Wire.
On behalf of 3Wire Systems, thank you for joining us. The archive session will be available shortly. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.